The haters always say, Tonya, tell the truth.
Tonya, how do you do that?
There's no such thing as truth. Everyone has their own truth.
I was the best figure skater in the world at one point in time.
You call that a clean skate? Stop talking to her. That girl is your enemy.
Waiting for the break of day.
Jeff was my first date ever. And my mom came.
You need to see a wholesome American family.
I don't have a wholesome American family.
Nothing's ever your fault. I was embarrassed for you.
My entire life, I've been told I wouldn't amount to anything. And you know what? Maybe I would.
4.8.
How do I get a fair shot here?
We also judge on presentation.
We're gonna need to even the playing field. I know a guy, shouldn't even be saying his name. Derek.
The press wanted me to be the pile of crap.
I never did this. What is going on?
We're with the FBI.
They know something.
What can you tell us about Tonya Harding?
I don't know a Tony Harding.
Aren't you her bodyguard?
When I was a kid, did you ever love me?
I made you a champion, knowing you'd hate me for it. That's the sacrifice a mother makes.
He cursed me. America. They want someone to love, but they want someone to hate.
I mean, come on. What kind of friggin' person bashes in their friend's knee? Who would do that to a friend?
Stop that.
Well, hey everybody, and welcome to the very first Art House Rewind. We're going to be spending a few minutes this evening discussing a film that we've played previously at Art House Cinema and Pub in Billings, Montana. And we have the opportunity to not just talk about its playing here at Art House, but to also discuss it a little bit and what we thought about the film. So tonight, we've got, at a safe social distance between us, some of our Art House staff members. We have Brian Oestreich. Brian, say hi.
Hello.
And this is Jake MacKenzie.
Hello, everybody.
So Brian is our creative director. Jake is our operations director. My name is Matt, and we're so excited that you're choosing to spend some time and just be a part of working to bring more film, art, and culture to this city that we love, Billings, Montana. Before we jump into it tonight, we're obviously doing this a little outside of how we typically operate as an art house cinema. This is not why any of us signed up to be a part of this industry. We love screening films. We love bringing people into rooms that are strangers and don't really know each other, but watching something together, experiencing it, and then potentially, hopefully having some sort of connection or conversation after the film. Obviously, because of what's happening in our world, we're not in a place to do that, and Art House had to close on Monday. And we are doing everything we can to just make the best of it. So we encourage you to stay connected here on social media or through our email, because we're going to keep you up to date on all the things that are coming, because we are reopening. And when we know what that date is going to be, we're going to make sure that you know and understand all the great festivities are going to be a part of it when we officially reopen, hopefully in the near future. But all that to say, tonight we're here to talk about this film, I, Tonya. So, gentlemen, we had the opportunity to sit down and rewatch the film, and these guys have done some work to bring some sort of thought and maybe some conflict a little bit to see what we're going to see what happens. We haven't really talked too much about the film, but ultimately this is a film that we screened back in 2018 at Art House Cinema, and it played really, really well. In fact, I, Tonya is the number 10 film of all time for us here at Art House, which is pretty great when you think about being open for 5 years now, that it's the top 10 film, if you will. So ultimately it played really well, but this is a film that's got some obviously substantial actors and director a part of it. So we're going to start with you, Mr. Oestreich. Tell us a little bit about I, Tonya.
So this is the story of Tonya Harding, of course, and the most people know her from the 1994 Olympics with the Nancy Kerrigan scandal with that. This stars Margot Robbie as Tonya Harding in it, and then also Allison Janney as her mother, sort of a strong figure in this, and also Sebastian Stan as her boyfriend. Most people probably know Sebastian Stan as Bucky from the
Avenger movies.
Avenger movies, yeah. Which he's unrecognizable. I give credit to the fact that he's
same guy.
Yeah.
Same guy as
Doesn't have a metal
Bucky.
arm in this
Doesn't
one,
have a
but
metal
does
arm.
in the
Doesn't
Marvel
yeah.
films, okay.
Yeah,
That
like
helps a little bit.
the wimpy mustache and I feel like he was so scrawny looking in it at times. Like unbelievable how they made him look in that. And then, of course, also Paul Walter Hauser, who recently was in Richard Jewell, which is another Olympic scandal sort of thing.
Yep.
And then Bobby Cannavale as the, what was it, the hard copy guy as well. So interesting stuff. And then it was directed by Greg Gillespie, who had done his first film was Mr. Woodcock, which I don't think any of you have seen. I know that
Just go look at the poster of Mr. Woodcock if you didn't know anything
it's
about
a zany comedy, nothing like that. The only one of his that I've seen is Lars and the Real Girl, which I absolutely loved. I know you two haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it. My wife Kate saw it and she really enjoyed it.
Lars and the Real Girl, I thought was great. I can't say it ranks higher than this one. This one's probably still his best work. But this next year he's going to be directing Cruella, the 101 Dalmatians remake from the point of view, sort of the Maleficent of the 101 Dalmatians world. So that one should be good. But
cool. So ultimately, how we're going to kind of structure this conversation around the film is we've got some different kind of categories that we're going to spend some time talking about. So first and foremost, we're going to deal with what we call the spoiler-free zone. And so this is a time for us to talk about some things within the film, but we're asking if you haven't seen the film and you don't want anything to be spoiled, then this is your space. This is your safe space, so get comfortable. But then we are going to enter a spoiler zone here towards the end of the conversation, and at that point, for whatever reason, if you haven't seen the film or you don't know history at all, then you might want to stay away or might want to just check out and then come back to this recording at a later date that you'll be able to be a part of that. So to kind of jump into spoiler-free zone a little bit, what we want to talk a little bit about is just some production tidbits. And then after that, just to kind of warn everybody, we would love to have some more dialogue and conversation with those of you that are watching as far as how would you rank the film, how would you rate the film, what are your questions, thoughts, ideas. Again, spoiler-free zone, but how would you kind of come about good film, bad film, okay film, however it was whether you watched it originally was at Art House or maybe you got a chance this past week to check it out. It is streaming for free on Hulu if for whatever reason, not for free. You need to have a Hulu subscription. But once they get that subscription from you, it feels like it's free.
It feels free.
It feels free, so it's the same thing. So, anyways, all that to say, production tidbits. Mr. MacKenzie, any production tidbits that you'd like to bring to what this film brought?
First one I saw is it's the first film that's produced by Margot Robbie. So her production company that is really focused on women-driven stories and women-driven screenwriting, that kind of thing. She then later went on to do Birds of Prey, which we were lucky enough to get at the Babcock. So that was a solely driven thing from her. But this is the first film that she produced with her production company.
I noticed the main thing, the first time I saw this and then rewatching it, I noticed it a lot more, was how much it feels like a Scorsese film, especially Goodfellas. It feels a lot like Goodfellas, especially with the music, but also the big dramatic dolly pushes they would do. You can notice it a lot when she wins her first trophy as she's a little kid. It kind of pushes in. I don't have a clip for it on this one, but it pushes in that very dramatic push that Scorsese does a lot. And then also a lot of the direct-to-camera stuff that they did in Goodfellas. This is very much a Goodfellas influenced film that takes a lot from the breaking the fourth wall.
It's
but
the
also
Goodfellas of ice skating.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, those big dolly pushes, and then also that fourth wall break also reminded me a lot of Birds of Prey as well. That she did a lot of that in that as well. So
So
definitely
fourth
noticed
wall, not to assume that people don't know, but fourth wall is essentially when the character on screen begins talking to you, the audience. They're breaking that fourth wall, and this film does it.
like you just did instead of talking to me. You talked to me.
Exactly, breaking the fourth wall. If you've seen, was it Deadpool? That breaks the fourth wall
Quite
a
a bit,
lot,
yeah.
and so that's a more popular film that's doing that kind of thing. But this film does it in an interesting way because obviously there's the interview things where they're sitting and they're recreating interviews.
Talking heads.
Yeah, which is interesting because a lot of those interviews are word for word, verbatim. They're just, they could have just taken the actual characters in history and put those interviews in, but they decided to have Margot Robbie or Allison Janney, recreate these interviews, which is fascinating. So if you watch the end of the film, the credits have some of those interviews.
Yeah.
So they're breaking the fourth wall on some levels, but then in the film itself, there's these moments where, like in the training montage.
Yeah, in the training montage where she
she's
says,
training for the
really
Olympics.
did this.
Yeah, the trainer looks at the camera and says, she really did this, stuff like that. So it happens. It's just sprinkled throughout. It's not all the time, but it's happening throughout. So it's the Goodfellas of ice skating films. I don't know why they didn't market it.
And it does make it feel a little more lighthearted in the sense that most people kind of knew this story, at least on the outset, a little bit of what happened, but to be able to hear, establish that documentary feel to it and then continue that throughout when they actually have to defend some more things later.
What I love from a production standpoint with this film is that the screenwriter, Steven Rogers, who's Steve Rogers, Captain America, not the same character, but Jake told me, like, if you want to remember, it's Captain America. Anyways, Steve Rogers, who wrote this film, is really responsible for kind of getting this out into the world. What's fascinating is he took kind of two sides of the story. He took her side and then the boyfriend, their husband's side, and really decided rather than picking one path or one route to tell this story, if you've seen the film, it's really working to represent both, which I think makes it more entertaining and more fascinating than just a cut and paste documentary about this happened, then this happened, then this happened. There's that fourth wall break of like, this didn't really happen this way, or someone is saying like, it did happen this way. It makes it more interesting, and I think for me, it made the film a little deeper from the standpoint of understanding this is how all of us deal with our own history and storytelling, that I have a side that I'm going to bring to the table, and
everybody has their own truth.
Yeah, everybody has their own truth, which is a line or an element that's dealt with in the story. So ultimately, before we jump forward on anything, we would love to hear what are your thoughts on the film and what's going on that level. So feel free to post that and comment that. We are going to check out the comments right now and just see and answer any questions or thoughts that people have brought so far to the table. So first and foremost, Mr. Ethan Canny was asking the question, what are you drinking? Well, that's a really, really important question, and I will let Jake, our operations director, tell us about that.
So Mr. Shea over at Thirsty Street, which is on the corner, they're still doing growlers for people, so it's takeout only. But they put a new hazy on tap today. So we didn't really catch the name of it, but we are excited to try it. We all enjoy hazies quite a bit, so it's on tap today, and Thirsty Street will be doing growler fills.
Yep. And I have to do a shout out because I also work there part-time during the weekends, so that's also why I've drank the most, is because I know that I'm going to get more eventually. So.
You're doing really, really good. And then there are some comments about how's your lime White Claw. Well, just so you know, there's no White Claw at Art House. There is White Claw at Babcock. It's mango. So if we're at Babcock, we might be drinking White Claws. So I have no shame in drinking a White Claw. I'm not sure.
No.
I don't. Do you have shame in drinking a White Claw?
No, and especially if I'm trying to do a cleanse or diet, then it's a nice way to still get some good cc's of alcohol without calories. So.
If you're looking to do a cleanse, do the Brian Oestreich cleanse of White Claw.
Of White Claw.
That's, I think, is what he's trying to say. So we're looking, don't really see any fan ratings or reviews, which is totally fine. So we'll keep our eyes out for that. But ultimately, ladies and gentlemen.
I do want to say, real quick, want to say hello to Brittany Stevens, who has checked in. She was our old events director. So good to see that Brittany's here. So.
She moved to Phoenix, and we haven't seen her since then. So I hope you're doing well, Brittany. Thanks for checking in. So we're going to jump into what is known as the spoiler talk, or spoiler warning, if you will. So make sure, if for whatever reason you haven't seen the film or you don't know history, then you're going to be a little spoiled in what's about to happen. And so ultimately this is going to revolve around a couple different sections. We're going to talk about our favorite scene or best moment within the film. So if for whatever reason you have one of those, feel free to post that. And then we're going to jump into a section called Nitpicks, where we're just kind of put on our nitpicky film buff hat, if you will, and have a conversation about things that we didn't like, things that didn't work as well within the film as we hoped it would have. And then last but not least, one of my favorite sections that we're going to talk about is what does it all mean? Obviously, films at Art House, if you've been to many of them, you can run out of the film and be like, what was that? What did I just watch? What was that the ending? Is that, are they dead? Are they alive? Like, what's going on? So anyways, we're just going to kind of end this conversation with that section of what does it all mean? So all that to say, let's jump into favorite scenes or best moments. Guys, what were your favorite scenes or best moments when it comes to I, Tonya?
I'll jump in. So I know it's a terrible scene to enjoy, but I really liked, there's a scene where she is dating her boyfriend, and he's beating her, and she comes in with her mom, who's played by Allison Janney, and it's, you know, an incredible role by her, and she says, I never let anyone hit me like that, and Margot Robbie says back immediately, you hit me like that, and so it just kind of shows that whole, like, it's a manipulative mother thing going on, and to me, it's just, you just see it in that moment of, wow, like this, what a terrible situation that she's feels the need to still try and impress this woman kind of thing. So, and then, you know, as she goes to leave, Allison Janney says, come give your mother a kiss. And she does. She comes up and gives her a kiss. It's just such a power move that to me is one of the better scenes in the movie. Just she's so stuck where she is in life.
The idea of an abusive relationship,
right?
What that can look like, and all of those kinds of
right.
things.
That we think we just immediately get out, but for her, she's stuck.
Yeah, and
trying
it's really,
to impress her mother.
I mean, the film did really well for both Margot and Allison Janney. They both got accolades and celebrated, and that's a scene that I think kind of points towards how good they both did. It's believable,
right?
In that moment, what's happening.
Yeah.
So
and even with Margot Robbie being more or less the star of the show, I felt that Allison Janney just stole every scene she was in with those sort of things.
Even when she's quiet. Like,
even when she's quiet.
Just staring at the camera. You're still just fascinated by her more than anything else that's going on in the
Yeah,
scene.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I have a couple small moments, but I'd say as an overall scene, the thing that I liked the most was when Tonya and Jeff first start dating. There's this montage of their budding relationship, and already we're starting to see scenes of him hitting her and arguments and things like that, and to me that just felt like a glimpse into what we're going to experience through the rest of this film and through the rest of this scandal is her being beaten and just not having the confidence to just end it right there, like not at that point when that first hit happens, like she could have just left everything right then, but she didn't have that self-confidence, partly because of her mother, but also from this guy that, you know, was the first guy to call her pretty, and now she's just felt like, well, I need to be with this guy. This is love. This is, you know, how relationships work, and she just stays in it.
I think it's an interesting thing when it comes to this idea of like an abusive relationship, and you say like she wasn't, this strong enough to
self-confidence.
Self-confidence, that was the language you used. It's interesting because they still show her as strong. Like every time she gets hit, she hits back.
Yeah.
Every time she gets attacked, she attacks back. So, and I'm not trying to, I'm not an abuse expert on any level, but it's a really interesting thing. Like they're definitely working to paint the picture of like, this is just the way that it was for her. Like that's all she expected. And I think goes back to your scene of like, she's getting hit. Well, that's what I expect. Like that's just the way things work, which is kind of the sad brokenness of that life or the film, whatever. And obviously there's some historical questions about who's right, who's wrong, and what really happened, how did it happen. Because in the film, the ex-husband says he never hit her.
Right.
You know, but so much of the film is him hitting her. So I think, you know, history aside and what really, really happened, I think the film does a great job of kind of portraying and talking about what abusive relationships have the potential to look like because of what's been fostered.
And I remember when this film first came out, like there is a lot of how much of this is actually true, because we are just kind of looking at Tonya's side of the story for a lot of it too. So you know, there is that to everything in this film needs to kind of be taken with a grain of salt, but
I think that's a little bit. I mean, the entertainment quality. Like you don't take it. Abuse is a serious thing, and this isn't. As serious as the film is, they don't take it seriously for how they edit it and how they go about things and tell the story. Like, there's so much that they're trying to. I think the very beginning of the film is almost an ironic. We don't know that this is true or not, but here goes kind of thing. So they kind of set you up for that. My favorite scene, and it's really scenes, revolve around. There's that moment. Shortly after the accusations come out and the arrests come out, after, spoiler warning, Nancy Kerrigan gets hit in the knee, and they're trying to figure out who did it, and they end up, coming after her ex-husband and her bodyguard, who is just ridiculous on that guy can't exist in real life, and then you go see the real tapes, and that guy actually exists in real life.
Yeah.
Anyways, after that scene, there's Margot Robbie sitting there. It's the interview style, and she communicates and says, "I was loved for a minute, then I was hated, then I was just a punchline. It was like being abused all over again, but only this time it was you." And she's looking at us, the audience, all of you. Right. And for me, I mean, I think Margot Robbie does a really great job, but for me, that's just such a succinct point of what the film is about, because it's not about history. It's not challenging what really happened. It's trying to have a different conversation, I think, and this is what it's pointing towards is this tendency that we have. I mean, this is before reality TV was a thing, but this was our reality TV. I remember when this happened on the news, and I don't know how old I was, but I remember it was a thing. I didn't follow figure skating, but I was still like, who did it? And you're trying to pick right and wrong, and you're still following the news as a kid. And so here's this kind of moment where we potentially are getting called out for we create this, right? Continuing to just foam at the mouth, wanting more information, the latest information. These are real people's lives and what's happening. And then kind of tied into that a little later in the film, as the ex-husband Jeff is, he's watching the news media leave his house. He says, all that craziness, all I'll ever be known for was done in a few months. Everything that happened in the film blew up. He was talked about more than anybody else on planet Earth in some ways for a season at a time. And then it shows this scene of all the news fans just leaving, and he's looking out his window. And then subtly on the TV screen behind him is the O.J. Simpson chase and what's happening there. And again, just a pointed thing, I think, subtly pointing at our tendency to just foam at the mouth looking for the next big thing, when these are real things that are actually happening. So for me, those were scenes that just grabbed me more than cool slick editing or
for sure. And kind of in your point as well, one of my favorite smaller lines in this was when after Tonya had just performed the triple axel, the first female to perform that, and she is doing her interview segment, and she has to cut herself off in the interview to start kind of weeping a little bit, because she's like, I'm sorry, no one asks me about this anymore. And that was just, that one really hit me, of this idea that her scandal overshadowed all of her success before then for so much that when we're watching this film and we're reliving these sort of events, that these are things that we don't remember about her, because if you hear the name Tonya Harding, the first thing you think of is Nancy Kerrigan's knee. So
and I do love, I didn't put this on my list because I didn't want to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy apparently. I do love the end of the film. That the end of the film is a flashback to her triple axel for the first time in competition, and everybody's celebrating. And then at the end of the film, she's a boxer and she's getting knocked out and her falling, and it's just cut back and forth to her ascension and her falling, and both crowds are cheering for what's happening. It's again, for me, it's these films of what are we creating when we don't really care what happens to people's real lives. We just want to be entertained, and this is what this kind of film is showing and depicting in some ways. I think is powerful.
Absolutely.
So we're going to jump into nitpicks, but before that, we do have a comment. It says, Nerd Corner question, budget was $11 million. Is that what that says, Jake? $11 million, and it grossed about $50 million. Is that budget amount normal for a film like this? And was the gross good, bad, disaster? So ultimately, that's really, really good for a film like this. This film comes from a distributor called Neon. It's a distributor we work with a lot. In fact, Neon was behind Parasite, which was the Best Picture winner, which we were really excited about because Neon is a smaller distributor, kind of indie. And so ultimately, for them to invest $11 million in a film like this is, it's a bigger film for a company like Neon.
Right.
But
I think they split it, didn't they? It was with someone else too.
Yeah. But what's interesting, at least the way that I've learned to look at film budgets and what they gross, is you can probably take what a film costs, so $11 million, and then double that for what the marketing probably cost.
Correct.
This had a big marketing budget because it was a big Oscar push. They were trying to, so that's money the company's spending to try and get these names in the film out there. So at the end of the day, it probably doubled what its investment was, which is pretty great for a film. So it's not necessarily Avengers Endgame numbers, which was still hundreds of millions of dollars, but made $2 billion. Right. So it's not that, obviously. But at the end of the day, for an indie film, this is really, really good. So, yeah.
So.
Okay, nitpicks.
I think you need to start this time. So.
I get to start?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's my biggest nitpick with the film. I think they did such a great job of portraying these characters on so many different levels in so many different ways. The work that they did with the ice skating and the way Margot Robbie trained as an ice skater and the CGI that they use, all that kind of stuff, I think I'm fine with. I think it works really great. But there's one big thing for me that I was just like, I'm out. I'm no longer invested in this as like this is a thing. And it's when they try to portray her and Jeff, her ex-husband, as 15-year-old. Like 15-year-olds. It just doesn't work. We have a clip. If you haven't seen it, you can't just put braces on somebody and all of a sudden they turn into a 15-year-old. So watch this clip.
So, what, do you like me?
You're so fucking pretty.
So I'm sorry. I don't care who you are. That's not a 15-year-old.
No,
There's
definitely
just no
not.
scenario where I'm like fully in. And what's crazy is they had done a good job with the casting of the little girl before that. Like that was believable, and the skating was believable, and all that stuff. Like I think you had mentioned it when we were talking earlier. Like or maybe it was you. Like put her in the 15-year-old role.
Yeah.
Potentially like. I don't know
Yeah,
what you would do with her on stilts, but do something, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, that makes more sense than that.
So what I like about that scene though is that it jumped from when she was younger to then, but the rabbit fur coat that her and her dad made now became a jacket.
Yeah.
So it got repurposed into the jacket, which I think if you're not paying attention, you don't see that, that fur coat that they made that's a rabbit like becomes the jacket. So it's like she's continuing to use those things in poverty to continue on.
She's still not 15.
She's still not 15, but
she's still not 15.
I thought that was an interesting part of that scene.
They should have spent $11 million and one extra $1,000 to pay somebody to be there for a day of shooting just to be a 15-year-old.
Yeah,
it took me out of the film. I was just like, I'm not.
I feel like you could have like you said, the middle-aged actress they had in there could have tried to age her up a little bit or something else or. Yeah, because that just didn't work. And I noticed that some films just, when they don't do either a de-aging or a older aging on the character, it can just really be distracting sometimes. And of course, I mean, this is before we started doing all the digital de-aging and like The Irishman and things like that. But yeah, just.
So for me, like I think the film works really, really great. And as I watched it again, honestly. It was a little different for me the second time because the first time you watch it, it's such a roller coaster. It's so fast paced in its editing, and I mean, we were joking earlier that the budget for song licensing for that film must have been astronomical because there's so many pop songs in that film, but it all works, and like you're just consistently engaged in what's going to happen. It was interesting watching it the second time. I don't know if this is a nitpick or just an observation, but the second time. It did feel a little long to me, which there's a lot of films that don't feel long to me. Like I'm more invested the second time, but this time because I knew what I was in for from the sporadicness, it was just like, okay, here we go again. I was just waiting for these big moments to happen, rather than being invested because it just felt a little sporadic. But ultimately, I really really love the film. It's for me, it just comes down to that 15-year-old thing of it just took me out. Yeah, so.
Yeah, it took me out, but also at the same time, like. it seems so weird to think that when Tonya Harding was in the Olympics, she was only 23 at that point. So, you know.
Yeah, and Margot Robbie's not 23.
Yeah, Margot Robbie's not 23 either.
23,
but I mean, honestly, I mean, I was a kid at the time, but even at the time, I didn't think Tonya Harding was 23 at that time.
She looked like your mom.
Yeah, she looked like my mom. She looked like an adult when I was a child.
I would have to agree. Nancy Kerrigan, same way. Like these were just grown-up adults.
Yep.
But for me, I think of any 15, 16-year-old that I know, and I'm like, there's no way.
Yeah.
It reminded me, I don't know if you guys are Friends watchers, but it reminded me of Joey when he's trying to pass as 19 years old in Friends. And it just puts on a goofy hat.
Right.
What? That's whack. And he's trying to. It's like it's comical because it's like this doesn't work. And I think this was one of those moments of put braces on her. Anyways, okay.
I've
just
basically
beat that one to death.
We've talked that out.
Okay.
You got.
Nitpick wise, I would say that, you know, just I've watched a couple documentaries. There's an ESPN 30 for 30 on this that really shows like she was an ice skater from when the time she's 4 through 23, and she's doing those competitions. So like the movie kind of just like does like teeny tiny little like dives into those different ages, but it's her whole life she spent trying to do what these other girls were doing and being judged for her social class level. So for me, and I know that was shown, I do, but it's hard to document someone's lifelong investment in that 20-minute flashback sequence.
Right. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
That to me is kind of a nitpick because she is invested.
For me, I felt like they did a good job with that, showing the tension between her and her mom.
Right.
Like her mom continually, physically beat it over her head.
Right.
Like, I'm investing so much of myself in that, and so for me, I understand why that's a nitpick, but for me, I was like, nope, I'm in. I get it. This is. I think multiple times in the film, she's there 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day or whatever.
And they did a good job of not only the tension between her and her mom, but her and the skating instructor that just didn't want anything to do with her, because of her social class, or even the judges later on that just discount her because of her appearance, her attitude, her home life, everything about her was just judged beyond just her abilities, which we'll get into later of how that's kind of an overarching point of the film. But my biggest nitpick, and I know we've talked about it a little bit, some people don't see it. I'm a nerd. I was a VFX coordinator on some television shows before.
VFX corner over here.
I was a VFX coordinator, so I see these. But some of the digital effects in the skating routines, I mean, they did great. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have done this, but I watch it and it's like, yeah, that's not Margot Robbie, and the digital face mask that they use. I can pull a scene up here to show it a little bit, and I'll talk over this a little bit, but they do a good job of hiding it. I will say that the way that they cut these out. Oh, this is going to be quite a bit of an intro, so we'll just talk over this for a bit. But so obviously this is Margot Robbie here when the dance starts out, and once it's mostly just ice dancing for a little bit, but once it starts getting into more other scenes. So here, still her, but you'll see that they do this little trick right about, I hope there's not a big delay and this is way off, but once it panned down to her feet, comes back up, you can kind of start to tell. They also do this thing to the audience and then cut back to her. That is not her anymore. They started to map another face onto that. And I can honestly, I can see it. I know that that's very nitpicky. I mean, this is a nitpick section, so I can be nitpicky, but it's definitely something that I noticed, and it's in pretty much every single skating scene where they're doing this digital face mask, and the technology that they use. If you're not going to advance the technology without being the first one to do it, essentially. So that's
and that's what they did. They were the first. So she does a full 360-degree face mapping that then they control with video graphics. So this dome is taking pictures.
So what we did was we set up a small studio.
It'll show you here in a second how they rearranged those pictures to then put her face on the skating scenes. So
I think it's interesting. I mean, to just realize that. So Margot Robbie trained for 4 months to be able to do just the limited work that we see her do, and she
Right.
does a great job of it. But they could not find anybody in real life to perform the triple axel on camera.
Correct.
Because I think it was only 2 female figure skaters that are able to do that, and they didn't want to do it
Right.
outside of competition for
Correct.
the sake of hurting themselves, because it's a legitimate
Still a
thing.
hard move.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I mean, they had to do what they had to do. I understand what you're saying, that it takes you out of it, but at the same time,
Yeah.
like, for me, it was something. It wasn't a nitpick for me. It was like a realization of how significant of a thing this was, and this still is on some level. That we can't find anybody on planet Earth that's willing to do this in front of a camera, because it's still so difficult.
20 years later, 25 years later, we're still on.
I'm gonna put it out there that we all are nerds, because people that watch this movie have no idea that that's
Oh,
not
yeah.
her.
Yeah,
So.
no.
I think most people.
No, I'm fully realizing that this is something that I hone in on, and I have let worse VFX go to print than this, so it's not like I could do any better. I'm just it is definitely something that I'm like, that technology was just a little bit behind.
Wasn't quite there.
But I mean, how many 90s movies did we see with bad CG that were just like, yeah, it looked good at the time, and then it started.
I do think it is one of those things that when we watched it in the theater at the time, it looks awesome. It's a how did they do it kind of thing. But then you go back, like short of maybe Jurassic Park.
Correct.
You know, like most films we go back and see even a couple years later, we're like, oh, that looks awful.
Yep.
When we didn't think that at the moment because the technology has advanced so much. This is, I think, definitely in that camp and in that category.
Absolutely.
So, any other nitpicks?
That was my biggest one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump into what does it all mean? And again, this is probably, we've played some really out there films as Art House, so as we continue to do this over the next couple weeks, because we don't have much else to do, you guys. So as we continue to do this, there's probably going to be some films that this is going to be a much more in-depth conversation, but just to talk about it, what does it all mean for you guys? What did you walk away from the film impacted by or thinking about and processing?
So for me, I follow the sports aspect, and I have to say it's the major struggle of class. And so, shout out to my mom. My mom was in a lower class bracket and still views Margot Robbie as a hero, or not Margot Robbie rather, but Tonya Harding. So she had posters of Tonya Harding on her wall, like followed her growing up, that kind of thing. Believes she's completely innocent. So that she is a big hero to people that coming out of that class structure, trying to break through that mold of they gave her bad scores because of the way she was. Like, she would have been scored differently if she was Nancy Kerrigan.
Yeah.
Like, if she was those people that had a name and a clout and an actual outfit to them, she would have been scored much differently, which is why I don't like that so much. I hate that. But so the whole thing to me is really that, like, struggle of class and breaking through those walls and those borders, and her trying to get out of that circle of abuse that she's kind of created throughout her life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big part of it. I also felt that it was a big more or less a redemption for Tonya Harding, that, kind of giving the rest of this story. This took place in the 90s, which was a time where social media wasn't the internet was barely what it was, and where, there was this jury of public perception that, just alienated a lot of people, and we've kind of seen these redemptions from not only Tonya Harding. We've seen a little bit from Monica Lewinsky, the hot coffee scandal at McDonald's. There's all these scandals that we've kind of been able to, not just go off of the late night joke of the story, but be able to actually dive deeper into these things. And it really criticizes not only those initial gut instinct, things that people were doing on television, where we didn't have a larger source of information to be able to go off of other than a headline, more or less. And also just being able to, add some more humanity to this story, and not just look at it as, this was some girl that wanted to cheat at the Olympics, more or less, but, give a face to it, give a little bit of backstory to, this is what her home life was like, this is what her life in general was like, and it also kind of touches on, again, with the O.J. Simpson thing. It really takes a stab at the 24-hour news cycle, and the way that, again, with that public perception, it honed in on that for a couple weeks, and then the next thing happened, and we moved on and almost completely forgot about it. So it's a real stab at just that mob mentality against someone, really.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, it does an interesting job of portraying really horrible, stupid, like non-coherent kind of individuals. When you look at the people that were trying to pull off the crime, and you know the mom and the abusive relationship there, and Tonya Harding definitely, as much as, I mean, some critics don't like the film because they feel it sympathizes too strongly with Tonya Harding. I don't necessarily feel that. I never really felt sympathetic towards her. I think there's this scene in the courtroom at the end where she's realizing that ice skating has been taken away from her forever. And I definitely feel that, but at the same time, I don't feel like, come on, like, you got to realize the choices you made and what you've done to get there. So I didn't really feel sympathetic towards her on that level. Felt, bad, that bummer. But anyways, so it does. I think it does an interesting job of painting, like, these are really ridiculous people, and simultaneously inviting us to see that they're still people. And what the news media and cycle and our rabidness towards wanting to find who's right, who's wrong, and accuse and blame, and even cancel culture now in our current society and those kinds of things. This is an interesting film that is decades old. The story is, I think, that's doing an interesting job of, like, even these ridiculous people and these ridiculous crimes outside of the bodyguard and that character, you kind of feel on some levels for most people on the screen of, like, oh man, like, you got chewed up and spit out, and man, that just sucks. And knowing that is continuing to happen, and it's not going anywhere. If anything, it's only ramped up with reality TV and all those kinds of things that's happening. So for me, I think the filmmakers, again, they kind of bookend with this idea of what is truth and what is really happening and these kinds of things, and trying to insert some sort of understanding of humanity in the midst of multiple sides of the story. So I think it does an interesting job of that. So
absolutely, yeah.
So to land the plane tonight, what we thought we'd talk about was this idea of if you want to go deeper or continuing education, if you're looking outside of just this film, we have a couple recommendations for you to be able to check out, and our good friend Jake would love to bring those to you.
Yeah, so I'll start off. So I got to know, before this film, the ESPN 30 for 30. It's called The Price of Gold. So ESPN does a series that they're absolutely dynamite. They're magnificent. They're on their ESPN Plus if you pay for that subscription service, but the episode is called The Price of Gold, and it goes over, it's pretty much the interviews that we see in the movie, but the actual people in those interviews. You get some more background footage, you get more information from friends and family, and you kind of see, like I was talking about, the sport aspect of it, that it's more than just a tagline, but that the sport's real, this whole situation's real to it. So that one's on ESPN Plus. The other one is Sharp Edges, and it's a documentary that goes over Tonya's younger life, and that's on Hulu, so it's streaming. So if you're able to watch I, Tonya on Hulu, you're also able to watch this documentary, Sharp Edges, which is on there. So covers some of her younger life.
Yeah. Well, all that to say, gentlemen, thank you for being a part of this conversation. It's been an interesting thing over these last couple days, trying to figure out what does it mean to be an art house cinema in a community when we're not legally allowed to open our doors and be a cinema.
You gotta be 6 feet apart.
6 feet apart. So again, we'll keep you all up to date for what's ahead as we discover more and understand more, but ultimately we know that public safety and health is most important. So thank you to those of you that are renewing your membership and continuing to support Art House and doing all the work that you're doing. Thank you for watching tonight. This will be posted as a recording and in some different capacities that you can share and and make sure to let people know that this is happening. We're planning to do this again in the next couple days, so if for whatever reason you're not signed up for our email newsletter or aren't following us on social media, make sure to do that. You can head to arthousebuildings.com to find out all that information. So thanks everybody. Have a great night. Stay safe, stay healthy, and if for whatever reason there's something we can do for you, please feel free to reach out on social media or send us an email through the website. Thanks guys. Have a good night.
Good night.